Hey everyone, welcome back to How to Train Your Gavin. Today I'm going to go through some books that really helped me get back into reading after I did 3 years at uni doing English literature. I think for a lot of people, uni kind of ruins the enjoyment of reading because you're reading them in such a very condensed period of time and you have to scrutinize so much in a book that you really do begin to lose the vision of what made you a reader in the first place. I mean, I'm not speaking for everyone here who's ever been to uni, but I think about 90% of the people I was on a course with said pretty much the same thing. Because we were under pressure to read like 3 books in 1 week and then to be able to analyze each and every one so intricately, it really does take away that enjoyment factor. And that's what happened to me. I wasn't the biggest fan of reading after I finished my course, and I used to be such a huge reader. I couldn't really read for pleasure during my undergraduate degree, and watching BookTube during that time really helped. Like, I could see people were still enjoying reading and enjoy reading books. You know, like, sometimes I watch gamers play games that I can't play on because I don't have the console, or it's a game that I probably wouldn't play ever, but I'm kind of interested in the story. It was kind of like that with BookTube for me. I would watch BookTubers read books that I couldn't read myself and get some satisfaction out of that. But then it took me a little bit longer after I finished uni in 2017. I started to pick up books again the next year, and this was just before I started BookTube, so it still took a little while after I finished my degree to get back into reading. So I did a video last week on books that I gave 5 stars that weren't really 5 stars, and one of the books in that video reminded me that I read it because I wanted to get back into reading. So I thought, you know what, let's do this video, let's talk about the books that got me back into reading after completing my undergraduate degree. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already. So let's get into the books, and I will start off with the book that I mentioned in that books I gave 5 stars video that weren't really 5 stars. I'm going to try and grab it, there we go, and that is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This came highly recommended from a friend, and I really enjoyed my reading experience reading this because it was one of those first books that I read that was rather literary, and after reading just a bombardment of literary and classics during my degree, I thought this was such a great way of reading a literary book that I felt was rather good. The Handmaid's Tale is set in the near future in New England, and the United States government has been overthrown by the Republic of Gilead. And Gilead is this extremely terrifying patriarchal system that now has this huge colony of, well, we have handmaids and we have commanders, we have lots of different things in this community, but essentially women are forced into these roles, and we follow Offred, who is the handmaid of a commander called Fred, and handmaids are forced to live with these families and produce children. Now, when I first read it, I thought it was really, really good, and I thought the explorations of women's independence and what women have to do to get their voices heard was extremely well explored. And then The Testaments came out, which is like a sequel to this, and honestly, that sequel should not have happened. So I really enjoyed this book until The Testaments came out, and you know when you read a sequel that ruins the first book? Well, that's what The Testaments did for me. Honestly, hated The Testament so much that I'm kind of rethinking my thoughts on The Handmaid's Tale. I might have to give this a reread just so that I can kind of separate it from its sequel. But at the minute, this one was just one that I thought was really good to get back into reading, especially when I was making that transition from all of those classics and literary books I read for my degree to ones that I think have such a great impact in the wider sense of the world, rather than those outdated ones that we were reading. I mean, not to crap on uni or anything, they did have some really great books in those reading lists, but the majority I honestly hated so much. I might have to do a video on books I was forced to read during uni that I hated, because there's a few. Long before uni, I was obsessed with The Vampire Diaries, and like, I loved the books by L.J. Smith, and I hadn't read a young adult book since then really, and that was around about 2010, 2011. So when I finished uni and the year later in 2018, I read my first YA book in such a long time, and that was The Wicked Deep by Shea Earnshaw, and I really, really liked this book when I first read it. Again, I don't know if it stands up to date and if it's still good or not, or if it's just god-awful and I just didn't say that because I hadn't read a young adult book in so long. But this one, I thought the story was so good. I love the fact that it's set in this sort of village where there is this legend about, I think, the Swan Sisters? No, Sparrow Sisters. Like, I love anything to do with witchcraft, and in this book we had the sisters, these Sparrow Sisters. I don't know if they're actually called the Sparrow Sisters. It's set in Sparrow, so I don't know if they're actually called the Sparrow Sisters, but I'm just going to call them the Sparrow Sisters anyway. But they were 3 sisters who centuries ago were executed for witchcraft. Now, in the present day, every summer, the spirits of the 3 sisters comes back and possesses the bodies of 3 girls and they get their revenge on the boys of the town. And I love that premise, I love that setup, and from what I remember, I really enjoyed the setting. I love the small kind of seaside-ish village town places like it. I wasn't expecting a lot of stuff that happened in this book because I felt like I was reborn into the young adult genre. So some of the tropes and twists in this I hadn't really seen before, but now I think if I read it, I might not enjoy it as much. I guess hindsight and also knowing what's coming will also hinder the rating. But I think at the time I really needed something like this. It felt like pure escapism at the time. And I think this was the quickest I read a book in years. And this was one of the first books that I read after I finished uni that I really, really enjoyed. Total surprise to me was Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman, and I genuinely didn't think I would like this book when I got into it, and I bought it. I think it was a book of the month or something, so I picked it up, and I really liked the sort of simplistic cover of it. It wasn't this edition, but it was like a white cover, and then I really enjoyed the sound of it, like Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. Lies. And I wanted to find out if Eleanor Oliphant was actually fine. And it was one of those ones where I really fell into it. I always remember Eleanor being this really complex character, and I was like, I haven't read a character like her. And there were things that happened again. There was like this twist that I didn't see coming. Very hard to describe this book, but essentially Eleanor is this very normal, regular woman who does a day job, and she has the same routine almost every single day, and she sticks to that routine. And then I believe it was a co-worker, I think he's a co-worker of hers, who kind of shows her different things. And she starts to say things in a different way. Well, I don't know what that sounds like to you. You might find that summary like the best summary you've ever heard of this book. I don't know. But I remember enjoying it and I didn't expect the twist. So this was another one that I was surprised by and again facilitated my love for reading again. Again, I haven't read this in nearly 3 years now and I don't know if it would still hold up to me to this day, but you know what, I'd rather not find out. I'd rather leave this in the past because it might not. But I did really enjoy it when I read it, so I'm giving it that. A really special one to me is The House with Chicken Legs by Sophie Anderson. This was the first middle grade book I'd read in such a long time, and it's kind of what sparked my love and passion for middle grade to this day. So I remember walking into Waterstones, and I think it was a book of the month. I just saw that it was a Baba Yaga retelling, and it had this gorgeous cover for one, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to pick it up. I honestly can't remember when I had last read a middle grade book, and I think this was probably the first true middle grade book I'd read as an adult. It just kind of sparked something in me and I was like, I enjoy this so much, and then I just started to get into middle grade and then it just snowballed from there. But this one, yeah, is about Baba Yaga, and we follow Marinka, who is Baba Yaga's granddaughter, and she is destined to become the next Baba Yaga. And Baba Yagas live in these houses with chicken legs and they help, you know, spirits cross over to the next life. Marinka doesn't want that for herself. She wants to carve her own path and make friends and all of the things that comes with being a child, but you know, things don't work out according to plan, and it's just such a fantastic book. It deals with grief so fantastically. I cannot wait until I reread this again because it just holds up, and again, it's what sparked my love for middle grade, so this one does hold a very special place here. I think not long after The House of Chicken Legs, I read Coraline by Neil Gaiman, and I love the animated movie of it. I think it was produced by Studio Laika, and I love that movie so much. And I had never read the book before, so I thought, you know what, let's get some more middle grade books read. Although I guess some people class this as YA, I don't know. But yeah, I thought, you know, after The House of Chicken Legs, I was like, let's see if I can get into some more children's books, and probably the best way of doing that is to read a book that I am already familiar with because of the film. So I picked up Coraline. It's so good. It's about Coraline who moves to a new house with her parents, and Coraline ends up discovering that there is this whole other world and she is being sort of pampered by the other mother. Well, I could probably explain it better than that, but I'm not gonna. You'll know what this is about, but I thought this was such a good fast read because it's so short. Yeah, it just kept facilitating my love for middle grade. Again, that's just the origin story, the origins of me loving middle grade. I read this and The Graveyard Book, I think back to back, and I really enjoyed both of them, but I read this one first, so this is why it is in this video. I also read The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, and I remember reading this on a bus, and I'd never read on a bus before. I just, on my way to and from work, I would just open this up and start reading. I mean, I did have a different different edition of it then. I just thought this was so beautifully written and I was just enjoying my experience of reading it. And after The Wicked Deep, this was probably one of the first contemporary young adult books I'd read. But like, I don't often read on the bus, but I just needed to keep reading, and it kind of gave me a bit of a love for contemporary young adult. But this book follows Star and she witnesses the murder of her best friend in the hands of a policeman. This deals with racism and it was just, yeah, one of those books that I thought was super, super important when I read it, and it still, I think, stands up today. I haven't reread it since. If you haven't heard of this book, then wow. But this helped with contemporary young adult and getting me into it. Coming highly recommended from a friend who doesn't usually read all that much is Cinder by Marissa Meyer, and this one is like sci-fi, young adult, fantasy, where it kind of takes fairy tales and makes them a little bit steampunkish. And we have Cinder, who is based on Cinderella, and she is a sort of robot cyborg kind of thing. And it's set in a world where there is this Moon Queen. Oh my gosh, like my memory of this is shocking. And yeah, there's things that happen. Each book introduces a different fairy tale person in this sci-fi world, and yeah, I feel like I need to reread this series. Oh my gosh. But I did read all of the series when I started Cinder, almost one after the other. And usually I'm terrible for finishing a series. I usually wait a little bit, but this one I read, I think, over 2 months. Not this book, like the series, but this book, I read it and I was like, oh, this is so different, because again, I hadn't read much like it before, and I just enjoyed the story. I didn't mind some of the romantic elements in it, because it definitely felt more like plot, and I was enjoying the ride with it. I was like, oh, I wonder where it's going to go next, and then I just continued the series, and then I ended up loving the fourth and final book in the Lunar Chronicles. You know, I'm so glad I read it, and I'm glad I read it when I did, because if I read it now, I probably wouldn't love it as much, so I'm keeping this one in the past too. But very fast paced, definitely sparked more love for young adult, and yeah, one of the first series I started and finished after uni. So I don't often read horror, but a book that is horror is Pet Sematary by Stephen King. I think the movie was coming out relatively soon, because, you know, this is like the movie cover, I think. And I wanted to read this before the movie, and I'm so glad I read this. I think this is one of my favorite Stephen King books, and I haven't read all of them. I probably only read about 6 or 7, but I enjoyed my time reading this. It was one of my first Stephen King books I'd ever read. But I'm not counting Carrie, because I read that kind of during uni, and I read this one, you know, of my own free will. So I really enjoyed the story of it. Essentially, it follows a family that moves to a new place, and the main character, he finds this cemetery where, you know, people bury their pets, and their pets can come back to life, but they don't come back the same. And I really enjoyed that concept. I wasn't the biggest fan of the ending, but I did like the way this book unfolded, and I was having a really fun time reading it. I don't often read horror still to this day, but I do dip my toes into it every now and then. And this is still one of the ones where I think had such a fantastic premise, was let down a little bit by the execution, but it still had that sense of dread throughout and tension that really kept me reading until the very last page. And again, one of the first horrors I read after uni, so I owe a lot to it for making me want to read more horror, because it so easily could have put me off, but it didn't. So yeah, I'm very thankful to Pet Sematary by Stephen King, and still one of my favourite Stephen King books. And then finally, one that you might be surprised about is the Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien. And this one I read literally, I think, the month before I joined BookTube. So I didn't get a chance to talk about this on my channel, and I would have loved to have done like a reading vlog for it or something. But that was the first time I'd ever read these books, and I had always wanted to read these books for years and years and years. Never really had the chance, and I didn't think I could have appreciated them had I read them any earlier. But because I was really getting into reading at this point, and it was just before I joined BookTube, I thought that trying them then would have been a fantastic time for me to appreciate them, and I did. I really enjoyed my time reading them. I thought the middle book, The Two Towers, was a little bit underwhelming and a bit slow, but just overall as a whole package, which is the way I'm reviewing it, is that I just had such a blast from start to end. I thought it was fantastically written, minus the songs. And because I don't still often read like epic fantasy or, you know, classic fantasy all that much, this has definitely been one that's still my favourite. I don't think I need to tell you what this series is about, but it is an epic adventure, and I love adventure stories, and this just made me feel smart. I love books that make me feel smart, and I read it and I thought, I'm like 5% smarter now. Saying that though, I mean, mean, I've probably done myself down by saying that, but you know. Really appreciate the series, and I appreciate what it did for me to get back into reading. So yeah, these are the final books I read just before I joined BookTube. So there was a little bit of a mix there, a bit of a mishmash of different genres and age ranges, and I felt like all of them had some kind of element to them that made me want to go back to reading more full-time, more part-time, I don't know. But it then made me confident enough to join BookTube and talk about books a little bit more and review them a bit more. I probably lost a lot of my analytical skills that I learned during uni, but at the same time, I mean, I'm reading for enjoyment now, and I'm not trying to penalize books for certain things or try to force meaning on things that probably don't need to have any meaning. So I'm just enjoying my time and enjoying the ride. So thank you to those books for getting me back into that reading mojo. Would I consider any of them my favourites? I mean, one or two, yes, but the rest of them, they just served a purpose. So thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Again, please give it a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment down below. Let me know if there are any books that helped you get back into reading after a period of time where reading wasn't enjoyable. And I will hopefully see you in the next video. Bye!